Pauline Manaka. I'm a qualified practicing attorney, South African attorney. I work at a law firm called BBPG Attorneys in Cape Town, CBD. I practice in dispute resolution and litigation. That's my area of civil litigation, commercial litigation. That's my area of expertise. And I've been practicing, I qualified in 2016, so I've been practicing just over 6 years. And I'm looking forward to today's chat on this lovely Women's Day with a former colleague and a very good friend of mine, Robyn Geswindt.
Yeah, so I'm Robyn Geswindt. I've also been practicing for now, I think about 7 years. I'm in the conveyancing space. Like Pauline said, we are former colleagues. I've been in conveyancing since I've been admitted in 2015. And I'm currently practicing at C. George Attorneys. So it's a conveyancing law firm.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent. Well, thanks very much for that. Now, today's topic is going to be very specifically around the property space and specifically within the Western Cape in this wonderful place we call home. But we will probably slightly touch on the broader South African market. And obviously, as Robyn said off camera earlier, there are, things differ from province to province, but I'm sure there's some common themes. Now, the property market is a behemoth in this country, and it is, and certainly in the Western Cape, I know it's a big part of what drives a lot of the revenue that comes into the province, within the financial services industry, also within the legal industry. So, and it's gone through some turbulent times in recent years, especially with the COVID outbreak and some of the lockdowns that we had. From your point, Robyn, I'll refer to you because Pauline was off camera slightly for a second. But if I can open it up to Robyn to start with, is there any key things that we should be aware of in the property space that has changed pre-COVID and post-COVID?
Yeah, so definitely with COVID, it had a huge impact on the property market. And also with the interest rates that were so low, I think it was a record low of being 7% prime during COVID. So with that decrease in the interest rate, there was a lot of movement in the market with the first-time home buyers specifically, because the market was more open and affordable, especially in Cape Town with the property prices, for first-time home buyers to join the property market. So we saw a big growth in that sector. And then a lot of people also still holding onto their properties where they would just take out further finance on their properties and then doing renovations instead of also just selling and buying new homes. And then also with the younger market as well, there's an increase in buying in a sectional title as well. So we also have seen a lot of changes in that aspect, where people are also not too familiar with the rules and the regulations of buying in a complex, what their rights are with the complex and dealing with the body corporate and the managing agents involved. So for a lot of first-time home buyers, there were a lot of questions also. But yes, the property market has boomed, and with the increase in the interest rates now, it is slowing down a bit because obviously with the cost of living and inflation, people are just more cautious with their budget. They're taking a step back and first seeing, okay, is it affordable to buy in this market? So there is a bit of hesitancy that we are seeing. But people are still active, and obviously property is a good investment. So people are keen in getting their foot in the door when it comes to property.
Okay. And Pauline, I know that you're much more on the sort of disputes resolution side of things, the litigation side of things. But is there any fundamental changes you've seen in your space since, pre-COVID and then during COVID and after COVID? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, so with dispute resolution, there's always going to be landlord-tenant disputes where tenants are defaulting on their rentals, but definitely during COVID compared to pre-COVID, there was an increase in commercial tenants defaulting. And you'll recall that during COVID, one of the regulations that the government had sort of suggested to commercial landlord was to relax sort of rentals and enter into commercial sort of agreements with their tenants so they pay less on rental. What happened is, as COVID came towards an end and we went from sort of level 4 to level 1, some tenants sort of held on to those deals. And instead of getting back into the swing of things and start paying up their rental, they actually went further and further into array rental. And so you sort of saw an increase in commercials, landlords having to look to potentially eject, it's called ejectment actually, try eject tenants. Whereas, usually with commercial tenants, it's 10-year lease agreements, 20-year lease agreements, it's commercial. When I say commercial, I mean malls, I mean office buildings. Those leases are usually quite long, but because of the defaults and the breaches of the lease agreements, you saw an increase in landlords looking to actually eject tenants and get new tenants. But at the same time, the market was quite quiet. If you eject a tenant, instead of trying to sort of hold them to their lease and get them to sort of sign some sort of settlement agreement or payment arrangement, it's very hard your property could sit on the market for a while now before you can get a new tenant because of the economy and, like Robyn mentioned, interest rates and this general effect that, the interest rates and the cost of living is having. So I think pre-COVID, there was always sort of landlord-tenant disputes saw a hike over COVID. It was managed a little bit through the COVID regulations, with landlords being more kinder and more willing to give discounts on rental. But as we went out of COVID, tenants that didn't step up and sort of revert back to their previous arrangements, you saw landlords coming to us distributors, ways to try and either eject tenants or hold tenants to their agreements. I think from the sales side, I think I've been involved in one or two matters where buyers unexpectedly sort of dropped out of sales. This is after they've already signed up an offer to purchase. And it's because they don't have the money anymore, or they've changed their minds. And obviously, if you are a seller, you don't want to put your property back on the market after, having found what you thought was a promising buyer. And so you then, you ask the lawyers to sort of consider the agreements and say, can I hold this person to the sale? If I can't, what kind of sort of damages can I get? So that's what we've seen. We've seen an increase in definitely sort of commercial landlords looking to evict, bad tenants, sort of just lower the bad debt, I suppose, in the portfolio is a way of looking at it. And I haven't seen, again, there's been one or two skirmishes with buyers and stuff, but I haven't seen that much because I think the market has been a bit suppressed, actually.
The thing that I thought was interesting, there's a few things that you both said that's quite worth unpacking a little bit. But working backwards, one of the things you said there, Pauline, was you've seen a bit of an increase in buyers pulling out after signing the offer to purchase. Now, obviously, I know every case is different, every situation is different. But I thought, I recently, about a year ago, bought a house, and I thought the rules here were that once you've signed the offer to purchase, that you're kind of inclined to have to buy it. I thought that was the deal.
No, you're correct. It's a binding offer, and it's a binding agreement between the buyer and the seller. But there's usually I want to say suspensive conditions, but you need to get, first of all, the bank guarantee that needs to be paid over at a certain time because that confirms that you actually have the funding to buy the property. If something happens and the bank guarantee is not paid over in time, that could trigger the seller's right to potentially cancel the agreement and put the property back on the market. There's been other situations where people just they want to renegotiate the price last minute and the seller won't. So it's very difficult to get out of a sale once you've signed that offer to purchase and or a sale agreement flows from that. And I'm not saying that lawyers have some one that can get either party out of the agreement. It's very difficult, and usually we're trying to negotiate to get to the parties back to the point where they fulfill the obligations arising from that offer to purchase. But we've just seen where there's a reluctancy or something happens, whether it's a delay in getting the guarantee from the bank or a purchaser rethinking about the price. He was committed to 2.5 million, but then he gets somebody whispers, yeah, well, actually in this market, that property's probably only worth 1.9 million. You're trying to renegotiate the price, and that sort of thing happens. But those are the kind of disputes that you're not going to see them go all the way into court or anything.
Yes,
that really
yes,
happens.
yes.
It's initially you pick up the phone, you call your lawyer, you say, what rights do I have? What
are the consequences if I want to cancel?
If I do want to cancel, what are the consequences? Am I looking at a damages claim?
Yeah.
Can they hold the deposit against me? Can I get my deposit back? And those are the sort of things that you speak your clients through. And usually those conversations will lead them to either stick with the agreement because they have no choice. They feel like they don't want to go into battle rounds. But sometimes it makes the seller uncomfortable, and they don't want to be dealing with, a wishy-washy buyer, and they wind up being like, actually, I'd rather just move on.
But in most instances, also especially with first-time buyers, they feel like they need to sign the offer to purchase.
Yes.
On that day,
it's the pressure they get from the real estate agents.
Yeah,
as well,
so they maybe
sign away because they're concerned about their commission. Yeah.
So they maybe viewed the property once, they're happy with everything. Now down the line, they've signed their bond documents, their transfer documents. It's perhaps rain, they've seen defects in the house that the seller or the agent haven't disclosed, or they find out now the transfer is from a estate, which also delays the registration of the transaction because the estate first has to be wound up at the master's office for the transfer to take effect. Or if the seller also in arrears with their rates and they don't have the money to pay it up front, that can also delay the matter, and the purchasers also get anxious to be like, what are our rights? What can we do? Can we pull out of the deal or not? So like Pauline, that's when you whip out the offer to purchase, see what clauses are in the agreement for those instances, and you just talk them through what the offer to purchase contains. So I also always advise clients, even though you feel like you are pressured from the seller and the agent, if there is an involved, you always need to ask like all your questions. Sure, you go view the property again. Some people just view the property once, they sign the documents. Then once the property is rented a few months down the line, they tell us, oh, there was a heavy rainfall and now the roof is leaking and the insurance doesn't want to pay out. In some instances, the assessors will come out and say, but it is a old defect because of maintenance issues. And then also it's like, okay, but now you have to refer it to litigation. You need to write the sellers a letter, give them opportunity to fix up the material defects in the home. So that is also another stage of how would I put it now? So just draining more money from the transaction, whereas if you just took your time, went through the property, made sure like you did, if you can do multiple viewings, make those arrangements and ask all the questions up front so you have a better understanding of what you're getting into than just blindly signing an offer to purchase.
I have a question for Robyn actually. What happens with developments? Like there's been delayed developments of like new estates. Say you bought a unit back before COVID, and then during COVID, the development actually just get going because of funding. There was a sort of not a seize, but a suspension on the development. And so you thought you were going to move into this amazing 2-bedroom townhouse unit in at the start of 2021, because COVID hit.
It's obviously pushed back.
It was pushed back. Are you entitled? And I've already signed. Can I get out of that contract?
So it depends how the contract is drafted. There are specific clauses for delays on the building side with the developer. So again, it all depends on what's stated in the contract, and obviously they have these standard terms of how, especially new developments, those type of offer to purchase are structured, so they make provision for all of those delays and all of that.
I mean, I was involved in it, but I'm assuming there were probably a few disputes around developers use COVID as a reason for the delay. Like it was sort of out of their control. It was COVID, and so actually you can't cancel. Just hold on your unit.
And also holding onto your deposit in that event as well. So
it's just, again, it just goes back to what I mentioned before, where people were just using COVID, even as it came to an end, as an excuse for a lot of default or breaches of their obligations. Again, I saw it mostly with tenants and landlords, but I can imagine it was across the board in the property sector.
Yeah, a lot of people were using COVID for as a reason to get out of a lot of things. I'm sure it was definitely in the real estate space. But that's really interesting because obviously, we're specifically at the moment talking more about the residential property side of things rather than the commercial side, which, as we all know, the residential side of things, it's a highly emotive process for the buyer usually, and for the seller as well, I suppose. And I know from the period, the process that I went through last year, which was obviously through COVID, it was a long process. It was a very long process. I think from sort of March to moving in October. So it was a long process, and anything can happen within that process, obviously. So you were mentioning, someone might tell you, oh, properties like that are only worth 1.9 rather than 2.5, and they start to renegotiate. But also, I can think of our own experience. We started to really mistrust the estate agent that we were kind of forced to use. There was a lot of narrative coming out of their mouths that we were kind of like, this doesn't feel right. Should we pull out? Can we pull out if we want to? And it sort of really soured the entire process. And then we obviously felt as well that they were in cahoots with the law firm that side, and things were just not going our way at all. So I can see from first-hand experience where things can change. And, COVID was getting thrown around a lot. We couldn't go and visit the property when we wanted to and things like that, and yeah, I think it's interesting what you say on that. The other thing that I wanted to pick up on was in terms of the dispute side of things, was from the landlord-tenant disputes. It's quite interesting that you say that, that as COVID hit, there was guidance, I guess, from the government in terms of, in layman's terms, asking landlords to be a bit kinder, and maybe let people off, and many landlords did, both commercial and residential. I know my mother-in-law, for instance, owns a lot of property in Cape Town, and she was very kind with her tenants. But then getting them back into paying the full whack was very difficult. People got very comfortable with the discount. Well, I was just going to say, Pauline, but I listened to a podcast the other day, and admittedly it was from America, but they were talking about the very same things, and they were saying that people have just stopped paying, and at some point they become a like, what do they call it? Not a sitting tenant, like
well, we call them squatters. So just touching on that, so getting rid of a commercial tenant is slightly easier. Easier is a very dodgy word than a residential tenant. In South Africa, residential tenants, you have to go through a piece of legislation called PI. We call it Passive Prevention of Illegal Evictions and Unlawful Occupants. And basically, it's a very long application because part of the application requires you, as the landlord, believe it or not, setting out that this tenant actually has, what is this called? Another option to stay. What's that word? It's an English word for it. Basically, they have another option to go live somewhere. Like, you have to show that they have a mother-in-law or a sister that can go live at once you kick them out. It's an obligation that's on the landlord when they bring an application to evict someone. It's called alternative occupation. It doesn't have to be like exact, but it has to be like, for instance, that this tenant has family in the city or has family in X, and if they needed to go live there, that's something you have to set out. Whereas with a commercial tenant, literally, this is the lease agreements, these are the terms. They had to pay their rental on the first day of every single month. They failed to do so for X number of months. The rental got up to this amount. We sent them a breach notice. They failed to pay in terms of the breach notice. And now the right to cancel has arisen. We're exercising our right to cancel. We've cancelled the lease and they need to be ejected. Most of the time, even with you send a breach notice and you thereafter send a cancellation notice, tenants still don't leave. So the issue is administrative cost that the landlord has to incur the cost of bringing an application to actually eject them because you can't take the law into your own hands. You actually can't go to your building and look it up. You can't. That's spoliation. You can't take possession away from the person. So you have to take legal steps. And I think that's what most clients find so difficult about the law in that aspect, that this person has completely, defaulted. They've completely breached this agreement. I've cancelled this. They have no right lawfully to be in those premises, but you still have to incur further costs and further administrative delays, because it is a delay of having to bring an application, having the application heard in the court, and then only once you have an order from the court saying the ejectment is granted, can you then, get the sheriff to go and eject that tenant and whoever else is occupying the property under them. So, and I think that frustrates landlords or land property owners a lot. But it's the risk you're taking when you are a landlord that is in the business space. It's built in. That's why a lot of lease agreements, especially commercial lease agreements, will have a clause about collecting and sort of allowing the land to sort of claw back whatever legal costs they've incurred if they have to take legal steps to enforce the lease agreement or to eject you. I'm not saying you're going to get all your legal costs back, but it is there. It's a clause in a lot of lease agreements, and as tenant you sign the agreement, so you're bound to those terms. But getting tenants out, and that's why I went back and I said most of the time, especially with the market, which is still quiet, sometimes it's better just to force the tenant to perform somehow by locking them to some sort of acknowledgement of debt or undertaking to pay whatever's owed, versus actually trying to get them out and then putting the property back on the market and hoping to get a new tenant. But these are the things that landlords have to juggle all the time now, especially in this market post-COVID and what we're seeing now with the cost of living and doing business.
And obviously this is not something that any of us can comment on, but I wonder what the thought process is on the law, whoever wrote that, about making it the landlord's responsibility to prove that they've got somewhere else to go. Like, that seems complete. Like, you don't even know them. Like, how would you know if you've got that seems bizarre to me. I mean, well, there's a tent. You can go and have that. You can go and live on the. I don't know. That seems crazy to me. I've got to be honest.
It's a mixture of two things. You have to show they probably have the means to find alternative accommodation, and or, like you said, that they can go to an aunt or whatever. And look, it's a statement you make in your application, and if the tenant is going to oppose, they're going to have to, what is the tenant going to say? Like, I don't have anyone to go to. Well, then the city and court is entitled to say, well, the city must find you accommodation in a homeless shelter or something. Because if you're effectively going to oppose the application and say you're homeless, well, then you're in the city's hands. Most tenants don't oppose the applications because they don't want to be, left to the city to look after. But again, they will stay in the premises till the day the sheriff comes. Like, no tenant is just packing up their stuff and leaving. So you do have a bit of a squatter situation from the period when you cancel your lease agreement to the period until you get a court order to eject. And that whole time, that tenant is not paying rental. You can't necessarily market it because you don't want anyone to come see the property in the state that it's probably in. And so you're not marketing it. You're not making any rental. And until you get that court order to evict that tenant, it's a bit of a loss, that little period for the landlord.
Yeah, and it just depends on how long you can swallow that loss for, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting. So look, in a snapshot, what we've got here is we've got Cape Town being probably, I've read reports before of being the number one property market, or certainly the most expensive place to buy property in the whole of Africa. The whole continent. It might be at the bottom, but it's top of that list. So you've got that coming into COVID. Then you've got COVID hits, interest rates go down, give a bit of breathing space for people, encourages first-time buyers, as Robyn mentioned. So the market is reacting to COVID well. It's still encouraging people. Also, the thing about COVID is it was a false recession, wasn't it? because nobody really, apart from businesses downsizing a little bit, there wasn't huge job losses like there was back in 2008. There wasn't people. It was a different kind of downturn. So people could still afford and look forward to buying property, which is great. So the market sort of stabilizes, and then you start seeing, well, now we're starting to see things come back to normal, as they say, which is completely untrue. Yeah, exactly. A conversation for another time. There's anything but normal at the moment, I think. So interest rates are going up. Cost of living is going up. And, I can say this from someone in the job market, there's actually a bit more uncertainty in the job market now than there was during COVID. So that's probably going to have a detrimental effect on the market as well. Plus, so I think, this is probably a question for Robyn, but do you think you've seen a bit of a downturn in the conveyancing space because of the cost of living crisis that we're going through?
I think it is slowly creeping in, yeah. Like I said, more people are more cautious, or they putting in their application, seeing what they qualify for. But now it's like, can I afford this bond installment every month with the interest rate increasing what it feels like every 5 seconds, and your rates is going up, your electricity is sky high. It's just that juggle of, can I actually afford it? And like you said, is my job stable and secure enough? I'm still gonna be safe in my job to be able to say, to make this commitment to say, okay, yes, ABC Bank, I am going to pay you X amount every month for the next 20 to 30 years.
And you've got as well, what I found during the process, we took a small bond from one of the local banks here, and the process of getting a bond was actually quite difficult. I mean, our situation is different because both my wife and I work for ourselves, plus I'm a foreign national, so we have to jump through quite a few hoops. But it wasn't easy. It certainly wasn't easy back in, say, the mid-2000s, 2008, 2009, before the financial crash, when you could literally get a mortgage just by turning up to the bank and asking for money. It's actually very difficult now.
Yes, and especially in your case with the foreign nationals as well, and you're working for yourself, you have to prove your income with all your bank statements over a longer period. Where if you were a South African citizen, it's just your 3 months bank statements, your 3 months pay slips, and then and you get your loan, they do affordability check, they do your credit check, and there's your answer. So banks have become more stringent with that, and then they also require some money. You won't get a full bond for the full purchase price, so they'll either require you to bring 10%, 20%, or 50% of the money that you need to have in cash, and then you have the bond for the portion, for the other portion. So banks have become more stringent, especially with non-South African citizens in that regard.
It's quite a humbling experience to have to go to someone you don't know, and then they start asking you why you spent this, that, then, and when you spent that, and it's like. But sorry, Pauline, you were about to say something?
No, I was going to say, do you think banks offer first-time home buyers higher interest rates?
No, I don't think it's first time. It all depends on your affordability and the credit check that they do.
Okay.
Because you also have to submit an income and expenditure form that you have to fill out also, along with all your supporting documents. But the banks also have this provision for the first time home buyers. They call it a 105% bond. So, say, for instance, your bond that you're taking out and the purchase price is for $1 million, then they give you 5% of that $1 million to go towards your transfer and bond costs. But it's only applicable if you are a first-time home buyer, and if you meet the bank's requirements to qualify for that. So that's something that the banks are giving people to be able to afford all the costs that are also involved.
Yeah.
Because once again, people will look at the property, okay, purchase price is $1 million and think that's done and
But
dusted.
there's so many other costs.
And then they come to our offices when you give them the statements to register their bond and the transfer costs. They're like, what is this? No one told me
100K.
about this money. And also with transfer duty involved, also people are like, where must I get 100,000 extra just for costs? Like, it's insane. So the bank does have an initiative like that. So they give you a certain percentage on top of the purchase price as a first-time home buyer. And then also with the Western Cape, they have this thing called the FLIS subsidy. So also if you're on the lower income end as well, I think the threshold is between 3,500. If you earn between 3,500, either as a single or in a joint household, up to 22,000, they give you a certain subsidy amount. So they say you earn the higher amount that you do get. So that amount can also be used to secure the purchase price, or it can go towards the costs. Or you can still also apply for it up until a year once the transaction has been registered. So then that subsidy amount, that's 50,000, will then be deposited straight into your bond account. So that will also help, or that one time, also first time buyers, that one payment from the bank will also help with your monthly installments per month to kill that debt also. So that's also another option available.
It's just an initiative by our government to try boost property buying amongst the lower income.
Correct, yeah. But a lot of people also don't know about it. So we'll also have clients coming in and then they're like, what? I've never heard about this before. So it's not advertised enough and people are not educated of what their options are out there. So I think on the bank side or also on the government side with the FLIS subsidy,
there needs to be
more noise made to tell people and encourage people that there are options available. Because some people also will take out a loan while we're still in the process of registering their bond to cover the cost, and then their credit and affordability score goes down. So that's also like you're in a catch-22 of where people can come up with this money. So that's also an issue. We tell people don't make credit or take out loans during the time once it's registered, because you also then don't want to lose that security with the bank gave you the thumbs up and said you do qualify for the amount. And then down the line, you make all these loans to pay all these costs, and then you could potentially lose the property as well.
That's really good to know, Robyn, that there are other options out there for people, because, like you both just said there, they're not particularly well advertised. And I think, I remember back from when I first bought a property many years ago, you come into this market as a first-time buyer really uneducated about the entire process. There's nothing, and it's one of those processes that unless you've walked the walk yourself, you don't really understand exactly what the costs are involved and what the issues are. I do worry a little bit about when you said about the banks offering the 105, because that was the beginning of the financial crisis in 2008, was when the banks started getting people into negative equity from the very start. And I remember, I'm still, I can still remember the adverts that would run on TV where they were offering 120% mortgages, and they would have these adverts of like, you'd have big plasma TV screens and a new BMW in the driveway, and it's like, take our mortgage and kit your house out, your brand new house, and with all the latest, electronic gadgets and everything. And people did it. And of course, when the markets went down, they were, 120% on the property was a bit worrying. But obviously, that's just from me being old enough to remember. But it is important that it is important for first-time buyers to have the option to cover the costs, whether that's through government assistance or whether it's through bank assistance, because I think we all know that getting on the what they call the ladder is the hardest thing to get on when you're young and you don't know whether your salaries have gone up. I mean, that takes back to the cost of living, right? We all know that whilst the cost has gone up, of everything, and not just recently. This is what the press will have you believe, it was all Vladimir Putin's fault. It's actually been going up forever, and consistently going up. But salaries have been doing this, yeah, and I think for first-time buyers or people looking at commercial property, whether it's as an investment certainly, or even I looked at buying our office here as an option once, and then I thought, well, the money you have to borrow, the interest rates are high, et cetera, is it really worth it? But it's a tough one. But look, the property in the Western Cape as a market is as we all know, is a billions and billions and billions of dollar industry. It is, as we've already said, the most expensive place in Africa to buy property. It is, a wonderful place that we all get to live in, which is great. But therefore it holds important relevance to the economy of the Western Cape. It employs a lot of people, like the three of us, well, me loosely, you two, relatively directly. But, is there anything that you think, and you may not be able to say, I don't know, but is there anything that you think is on the horizon? Any sort of challenges that we think, or will it just be the interest rates going up? Do you think we'll see a challenge in the market, which could then lead to more work for professionals like Pauline?
I think from my side, I think what I found interesting is the ongoing debate, and it's still ongoing, so this from a commercial perspective, of whether or not people should still go back to the office. So if you are a commercial property owner, is it still worth owning a property, or are we actually going to work space? Is it called work space?
Yes. Those shared spaces.
Shared spaces might become actual thing now. And it's been interesting to see the rental marketing, or the rental prices for, the square meter price for some of the properties, where I think pre-COVID they would have been either double or substantially more. So that the competition that's, resulting from people working from home and fewer people in the office has, on the one hand, it's created more supply at a much more competitive pricing level. So I think it may be interesting to see if that's going to hold, because a lot of people are still working from home and like working from home, and living in the city is very expensive. So a lot of people actually drive out from outside the city, 20, 40, minute drive to get into the city to go to work. But if you can tell your boss, I'm happy to work from home, what does that mean for the commercial property owner? So it'd be interesting to see if that's going to continue. I think it's going to be mixed. I think you're going to see an increase in mixed use buildings,
spaces,
where buildings are not just an office building. It's going to be partly, at the bottom floor might be offices, the top floor might be a penthouse. I think we're going to see an increase in mixed use buildings in the city, especially in the inner city. And from a residential side, I think for the last few years now, and I think the new mayor of Cape Town, it's part of his new agenda, is how do you manage the increasing number of people in Cape Town? We all know that Cape Town's really put itself out there as a city for foreign people to come work in. So come work from here remotely.
Yeah.
But you also have a lot of local South Africans moving to Cape Town as it emerges as not only the center of property, but also investment banking, asset management banking. There's a lot of big corporations that have their head offices in Cape Town. So how do you manage the increase in population? And because as much as I've seen a lot more people in the city, I don't think I've seen a lot more buildings for residential purposes being put up. So it'll be interesting to see how the city changes on that scale. I think a lot of it is going to go back to hopefully fixing our train system, and so allowing people to live outside of the city but be able to come in here
and
easily.
Reliable
Otherwise,
transport.
you're going to have the issue where I'm happy to work for you, but I'm not going to sit in my car for 40 minutes. Petrol's too expensive. I'm going to work from home, but then that suppresses the the market in terms of all these empty buildings you find in town.
Yeah.
Unless they go to a mixed use sort of space, like I mentioned. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen in the future?
No, I definitely agree with Pauline. So that is a struggle, especially in the city. But there's also the developments in the city with the mixed use space as well. So there will be commercial property at the bottom, and then the apartments are built on top. So it's also a better investment for the developer and all the investors in the property space, where they know they have their money based on the rentals. So they have X amount of apartments instead of 100 apartments, they only have 50 apartments to fill to find buyers. And then the bottom is going to be the commercial space where they need to get commercial clients involved. So I think that also spreads the risk, I would say, in getting the development going as well. But definitely the issue is the space in Cape Town, the prices to live in the city, and the transport issue. So it's going to be interesting to see what flows from that.
Cape Town has these unique challenges that it's hugely popular, but also within the CBD, we're talking about a finite amount of space. I have been lucky enough to live in places like Hong Kong and the Cayman Islands, and I used to visit Bermuda a lot. And these are places that are hugely popular. People swarm to them, but they're limited amount of space. In places like Cayman and Bermuda, there's rules. You can't go above a certain level with the house. I think it's 5 levels, 5 floors you can't go over.
There's height restrictions in the city as well.
There is height restrictions.
But also, like you said, there's a mountain and the ocean, so where are we expanding to?
Yeah. There was a recent judgment by Owen Rogers. Actually, I forgot the name of it, but it's come out and it's confusing builders about whether or not you can build above the roof. So you'll have a roof, and whether or not you can put appendages on the roof, and that takes you above the height restriction. Whereas in the past, it was you can where the building ends at the top, as long as that meets the height restriction, it's fine. If you put anything on top, it doesn't matter. That doesn't count. It doesn't. Oh. But now the judgment says that, for instance, if your building is 5 meters up, but if you put a pot plant and that pot plant goes above the 5 meters, then you're actually you're over the limit. And there's a lot of buildings currently in Cape Town that are basically what's it called? If you follow that judgment, the buildings are what's the word? They're not correct. Like they haven't been built correctly. Like they don't follow the rules in terms of that judgment. But I mean, it's a judgment. There's the SCA and the Concourt that will decide if it's finalized. It's a high court judgment. But it's things like that. So like, I mean, I don't know. Hong Kong, I don't know how high those buildings are, but there's restrictions in Cape Town. You can't build to a certain height, and it costs money.
Yeah, well, Hong Kong's ridiculous. I mean, it's 11,000 skyscrapers on every patch of grass. They'll build another one. And I was actually having a conversation with a property developer here in Cape Town fairly recently, and he, obviously being a property developer, was very encouraging of the fact of making Cape Town the new Hong Kong. And I said, well, having lived in both, I say no, because you won't be able to see anything. But,
Yeah. It's just going to be people running to the court saying, he's messing up with my view.
Yes.
I don't have any light coming to my apartment. Although our courts are a bit like, your light? It has to be like a real material issue. As in, it has to be in violation of the building regulations, the municipal building regulations, like an actual violation of the DMS rule or something, not just, you're not getting enough light. I don't know if you've seen, there's been a lot of development in Camps Bay, a lot of hotels coming up, and a lot of old residents ran to court saying, if that building comes up, I'm not going to be able to see the ocean at all. I'm not saying the court won't consider your view, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It actually needs to be a violation of a DMS regulation or a building regulation before they're going to stop that building going up. But so I think we're far away from Hong Kong, though, because it's just going to be hundreds of people running to the court and caucuses and communities and the Camps Bay Homeowners Association is going gonna be like, no, this is not happening. So part of Cape Town's soul is that everybody should get a little bit of view of the mountain, a little bit of view of the ocean. And if you strip that away, it's no longer Cape Town.
And also Cape Town as a city just simply couldn't cope with that level of increased people as well. There just isn't the room. But both of you sort of touched on the fact that there is this increase in almost like an intermigration almost of people moving from Durban and Joburg and other parts of the country into Cape, as the gig economy takes effect and people can start working from anywhere. I've seen a massive increase in international firms looking to open up branches here in Cape Town as well, across all different. Amazon's just there, actually, just behind us. And obviously, well, temporarily until they move into their new campus. That's a big issue, yeah. But I think, Pauline, I think you're right in terms of the property market having a fundamental, certainly the commercial property market, having a fundamental change over the coming years with the change in the way people work and commute to the office, if they indeed do. It was interesting to hear your point, both of you making the point about the increase in mixed-use buildings being built. But also, don't forget, Cape Town's also got this. It's kind of wonderfully flat once you get outside into the northern suburbs, and therefore you can go. There's a lot of room to build out, and if you take between the city and Century City and then further on to Plattekloof and then Belleville, and you might find, just as you found that sort of places like Paarl, Somerset West and Stellenbosch have now sort of almost merged into one, you might find Cape Town, the city, moving further out, sort of almost encroaching on Belleville and then even further, and it all just becoming one major city. So we've got places to go, but Pauline touched on a very, very good point, and that is the transport. Because if they don't get the train service working, then we'll have no way of getting anywhere anyway. But that also needs to be looked at. So yes, the young mayor of Cape Town, I think his name's Jordan, has got his work cut out with everything that he's facing. Yeah, well, let's hope he stays enthusiastic. Let's keep sending him messages of like, come on, Jordan, you can do it, because the city needs someone who's that enthusiastic. But just to sort of recap on a few things, like I said before a couple of times in this chat, the property market is such a driving force of the local economy here. Well, the South African economy, it's huge. It's got to be in the top 5 of most important industries in South Africa. It fuels a lot of the local economy, which is fantastic. It employs a lot of people. It's going through specific challenges. And I don't know whether you would agree with this, but I think all the challenges we're facing as people, but as also as employees, as well as consumers, it's all coming very quickly at the moment. Things seem to be happening one after the other. And the interest rates increasing are going to concern people. They just went up 75 basis points, didn't they, fairly recently? And there'll be there'll be another one coming soon, no doubt. But hopefully that will start to level off, because obviously that's not usually tied in with such a huge inflation as well. And, on that point, the inflation point, I don't know where they get their figures of like 11% or whatever it is, because my petrol has doubled. And so that would constitute 100% in my head. Maybe I'm wrong, but...
The percentage effect, when you actually work it out, we each individually know what the actual monetary effect, when we do our groceries and we put in our petrol, when we buy gas, we know what the actual impact is. And it's double.
Yeah. It's insane.
It's insane.
We know that it's doubled, but, and that does affect, but that also from a legal perspective, when people are coming to either Robyn to purchase or, to Pauline to get them out of trouble or get them out of a situation or navigate a situation, that also comes into effect because businesses have got less money. People have got less money. So I guess you guys are probably having to feel it a little bit in terms of, I suppose certainly from you, Pauline, would be to whether to advise them to really go. It's going to be very expensive. It's going to be this. Are you sure you want to do this? I think you touched on it at the beginning. The ideal scenario is to negotiate them back to what they originally decided to do, get them back to their original decision as best possible. So that's really interesting. Is there anything that you guys also wanted to add about the property market? Is there anything that we've missed off, or is there anything you wanted to raise? Because I think we've covered a lot of ground at the moment.
No, we did cover everything.
I think what Robyn did mention, and I think she said a lot of times, and if you're a first-time home buyer, don't be afraid to not only speak to your agent, speak to a lawyer friend if you have a lawyer friend.
Yes,
just seek legal advice.
Definitely.
Read your offer to purchase very carefully. If there are clauses you don't understand or you're not sure about the consequences of it, then speak to a friend. I've had friends ask me to read their lease agreements. I've had friends ask me to settle lease agreements for them. I've had friends say, I'm not sure about clauses and I'm like, this is free legal advice, but it's fine. The point is, if it's important for you to know what you're signing, what you're signing up for.
And also, while you're in that process with attorneys, ask all your questions.
Yes.
I always ask clients, do you have any questions? If anything comes to mind, don't hesitate to give us a call. Yeah. We're here to explain everything to you and get you through this process. Yeah. So, a lot of times people are just too scared or intimidated. They just sign.
Or they feel like they're wasting the lawyer's time.
And
then
they're like,
job,
what you doing? I mean, that's what they're paying us to do at the end of the day. So, yes, definitely just be more assertive, I would say, because you are a part of the deal, a very important part of the deal in any event. So definitely just ask a lot of questions and make sure you know what you're getting yourself into as best.
I think that's a really good point. I think, just to add to that, Robyn, but we'll add both of you, is, things like the thing that Robyn brought up earlier about the assistance that is possibly available for, say, first-time buyers is to remind people to ask, is there anything out there that can help me? Is there any schemes or government grants that I can be approved for? Because again, people don't know what to ask because they've never been through that process before. So they're not sure what to ask. And look, I'm not slagging off real estate agents at all. I think they do a wonderful job. Some of them are very, very nice. Some of them are very good. Some of them are very knowledgeable. But be careful with every single one of them because they do get paid on commission and they will not necessarily tell you everything straight away. And you need to make sure that I felt with my real estate agent recently that I was things weren't being told to me, and also that I was being pushed into things. And I would advise anybody out there, whether they're making commercial purchase or whether they're making a residential purchase, is just, if you don't feel comfortable, just take a step back. You don't have to sign anything. And also, this is something, they might try to get you to use their conveyancer, but I think you can use any conveyancer, can't you? You can use anyone that you want.
So on the seller side, if they appoint an agent, and if that agent works with a specific conveyancing firm, then they will give all their deals to that side. And then on the bond side, you're on the bank's panel of attorneys. So each instruction gets automatically sent to a panel on the bank's, an attorney on the bank's panel. So that is the issue in a sense where if it is a estate agent and they only use one or two firms, then you're kind of stuck with that. But again, ask questions. You are paying the fees. If you, like you said, if you're feeling uncomfortable with anything, raise it. And then people also make verbal agreements also to say, oh no, we'll paint the outside, don't worry, before you move in. I'm like, did you sign an addendum? The property is going to register, you upset, you don't want it to go forward, but there's nothing in the contract, there's nothing written down, there's no addendum to the sale agreement to say you want this down. So definitely, yes, people will also just go on your word to say, oh, you're going to sort it out before it registers. but make sure you get everything in writing. Especially if you're feeling like your back's up against a wall, make sure everything is in writing so you can hold them accountable at the end of the day.
Draft an email after your meeting with the agent.
Yes.
Send the email off. Have them come back and say, I received your email. That's the contract. That's the addendum. You know, people forget that. These days, the courts are even consider WhatsApps. Do a whole WhatsApp. I met you today at 2:00 at the house. Say what happened. Those blue ticks that they've read it and received it, that could arguably constitute an agreement, an addendum to the contract. There's but getting it in writing and not leaving it, especially when it comes to something like property.
Yes.
You know, it's so much better to get something in writing than have it in. I mean, some contracts you can have them orally and they'll still stand, but when it's something like this.
Well, I tell you what, you two have been brilliant today, and I think that there's definitely a little market for the two of you to do a little podcast of your own, giving little advice like this, because you look great on this screen together, and you've got such wonderfully useful advice for not just first-time buyers, but also commercial buyers. But it's really been fascinating to get an insight into what's working within that sector. What's obviously it's impossible to sort of see what's going to happen going forward, but it's been wonderful to be talking to you both, and I want to thank you both for your time, and obviously wrap you up and let you get on with your Women's Day and your day off. So I'm going to press stop now, but thanks very much for your time, and then we'll carry on talking as well.